So happy to see you, Robert. Always love talking to you. Thanks for taking the time.
No, thank you. It's been a long time in the making.
Yeah, I've been talking about the cash flow quadrant. We've been doing a 3-day live event here. I don't know, about 500 people have been on live for 3 days as we've been doing this, and I've been banging the table on the cash flow quadrant, and specifically the need for people to use the B and the I quadrant. So always earning wealth or creating wealth, and then investing the wealth. I want you to talk about that because you're the creator of the cash flow quadrant. I'm just a disciple. But before that, I want to talk about the importance of education. You're an educator first. And tell us, you have the rich dad and the poor dad, and tell us about the importance of education and the difference of mindset.
The thing I don't like about education is how it's really indoctrination now, not education. The base word of education is educe. Educe means to draw out, not indoctrinate. And that's what makes me nauseous about going to school. So that's what I have to say. And then I'll just show you, this is my very first book ever written before Rich Dad, Poor Dad. It's called If You Want to Be Rich and Happy, Don't Go to School. And I wrote this before Rich Dad, Poor Dad simply because we don't teach anything about money at school. And then when I took the book up to the publisher with Simon & Schuster, Rich and Happy became a bestseller. But the publisher at Simon & Schuster was pretty good. He says, I could make Rich and Happy, I could take it. Simon & Schuster would take it. But he was a very cool guy. He says, but you haven't told me what you really know. So what do you mean? He says, you haven't told me what you know. You're just angry about school and not educating people. So I sat there, looked at him for a while, and he says, when you tell me what you know, you'll have a bestseller. And I'd sit at night typing. I said, what does this guy mean, the editor? Tell me what you know. And this, again, the word education comes from the word educe, Latin. It means to draw out. And I sat there at night about a year after Simon & Schuster turned down Rich and Happy, Don't Go to School. And I'm sitting there, and suddenly it came out. It said, I was keystroking my next book, and it said, I had a rich dad and I had a poor dad. And that's how it started. So for those of you who may have read Rich Dad, Poor Dad, this is the base thing of it. It's one drawing. It's a financial statement. Income, expense, asset, liability. And sitting behind me is a cash flow board game. So after I realized, again, they do say, when the editor said, tell me what you knew, the reason I was in real estate is because I had a rich dad and a poor dad. And my rich dad taught me about money playing Monopoly. And most of us know the formula for Monopoly. It's 4 green houses, 1 red hotel. 1031 tax-deferred exchanges. So you don't pay taxes. And that's how this whole thing evolved. So this here is an income statement and balance sheet. That's what my rich dad said. This is your report card. The cash flow board game came with this here. That's a financial statement. Income, expense, asset, liability, statement of cash flow. And really, that's how the whole thing evolved. And the reason cash flow, if you look behind my head, it says cash flow up there, is what makes a person rich is not their college degree. Because you look at a lot of people who are extremely rich, didn't go to college. Walt Disney, Bill Gates, Steve Jobs. And the word that an entrepreneur must know is cash flow. So when you look at the definition of asset over here, cash flows from the asset into the expense column, and income column, and expenses flow out liabilities fly out the expense column. So my poor dad always called his house an asset. That's why he was poor. Your house is not a frickin' asset. It's a liability.
Yeah.
And so it goes down to as simple as a definition of a word. When you call your house an asset, or your college education an asset, or your car an asset, you're misusing the word. And the definition of a liability is, an asset, excuse me, definition of an asset is something that puts money in your pocket, whether you work or not. So with that, I published Rich Dad, Poor Dad. It was turned down by Simon & Schuster again. And so I had to self-publish it. And as you know, the number one skill of an entrepreneur is when it starts when they say no to you. So I got turned down again. So I called my friend up in Austin, Texas, and he had a car wash. And I said, would you put my books in your car wash? He says, we don't sell books in car washes. So that's a good point. That's a good point. I said, no competition there. So I said, I'll send you 12 books. He says, if they don't sell, you'll take them back. I said, yeah, sure. It's a guaranteed sale. So I put the 12 books there, and I'd call him up. He says, they're not selling. And then one day, all 12 books were gone. So his name was Keith. I called Keith. I said, what happened? He says, I don't know. They're all gone. One guy bought the whole thing. So this is Austin, Texas. And then about a month later, I got a phone call from Dallas, Texas. And the guy in Dallas, Texas says, hi, my name is Bill Galvin. I read your book. I said, oh, good. Did you buy it? He said, no, one of my friends bought it for me. So I bought the rest of them. Good. Why did you buy my books? He says, because I'm a diamond in Amway. So although I was not in network marketing at the time, I do recommend network marketing in Rich Dad, Poor Dad, but I wasn't with Amway. And Amway picked up Rich Dad, Poor Dad and took it throughout the world. And the only reason I wrote Rich Dad, Poor Dad was to sell the board game. And the board game is now in 50 different languages throughout the world. So that's how the whole thing kind of started. And it definitely wasn't because of my college degree. And my college degree is a Bachelor of Science, which is BS, in oil and ocean transportation. I can drive oil tankers. So today I own oil wells. I don't own oil stocks. I own oil wells. And so when Biden became president in 2020, his first job was to take the Keystone XL pipeline and he disconnected it. And the price I was selling oil in those days for $30 a barrel. My oil wells were in North Dakota, Louisiana, and Texas. And the moment Biden took off the Keystone XL pipeline, oil went from $30 a barrel to $130 a barrel. And although Donald Trump is my friend, I kind of like Biden after that. I was making so much money. But unfortunately, what Biden did was he now bankrupted the middle class. And now today we have working homeless, because they can't afford, energy drives the civilization. Imagine if you didn't have electricity. So when Biden took down the Keystone XL pipeline, I knew he was screwing America. So all the things I was concerned about were coming true. And America's in serious financial trouble today. And it was why the biggest stock market crash in history was coming, and it's coming this year. So this was book number 2, and it's called The Cash Flow Quadrant. And it also became a bestseller. By the way, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, thank you. Rich Dad, Poor Dad is still number 1 internationally after 25 years. And because I wrote the book, because I asked the question, why don't we teach money at school? Yeah. Why are we teaching gender bending and critical race theory and all that stuff? I just want to say this much. I'm Japanese. I'm not a white guy. In America, there are racists in America, but we're definitely not systemically racist. And we may have been racist during the earlier or slavery, but if you study history, what ended slavery was not the Civil War, but was technology. Because there were slaves all over the world. It was called the Gunpowder Revolution. If you had gunpowder, you had slaves. So that's why there were slaves all over the world. There were white slaves, black slaves, Asian slaves. The guy who had the gun created the slave. And that's what caused guys like, Columbus to sail and all that stuff throughout the world. The American Indian was the biggest loser of all through the gunpowder. And we think about this whole thing. And then when slavery finally ended was technology. when a guy like Eli Whitney invented the cotton gin, you didn't need slaves anymore. So what happened is technology and set people free. But unfortunately, our education system hasn't set people free. So our school systems still tell you to go to school, get a job, which is an employee, or become self-employed, small business, or a specialist like a doctor, lawyer, or accountant, or computer programmer. And so when I was in 1974, I was a pilot for the US Marine Corps. And when I came back from Vietnam, United Airlines was hiring. So my poor dad, who was a PhD from Stanford and Northwestern University of Chicago, said, "Oh, good, go fly for United Airlines." And I said, "You don't want me flying an airline. I'm a helicopter pilot. I'm a gunship pilot. You don't want me flying your airlines for you." So I went to see my rich dad, who was my best friend's father. And he said to me very simply, he says, "What do you want to become?" I said, "I want to be an entrepreneur." In other words, I wanted to come on this side here. And this was my poor dad's side. My mom wanted me to become a doctor. But as some of you know, I flunked out of high school because I cannot read and write. I still went to a good school. I had nominations at Naval Academy and Merchant Marine Academy. I'm not stupid. I just didn't like school. So anyway, this is what school sends you to. And I sat there talking to my rich dad and going, "So what else do I have to do here? Why?" And he says, one big reason is taxes. Employees, this is throughout the world, it's pretty much the same. Employees pay 40% in tax. That's basic throughout the world. And S's, or self-employed or small entrepreneurs, small business guys, pay 60%. So today with Amazon firing and everybody firing people left and right because we're going in for a hard landing, that behind me is a hot air balloon. And that's the US economy. That's why it hangs there. And it's coming in for a hard landing. So unemployment is going through the roof right now. So what happens is many people quit their job and they become an entrepreneur. The trouble is to come here. And so many times small entrepreneurs go from job security and then they move into a higher tax bracket. So this is my long way of saying it. When I was talking to my rich dad, he says, if you're going to be an entrepreneur, you've got to have different skill sets. You have to learn what the average person does not learn. The reason I wanted to talk to Mark in your group here is, what's the difference between this side and this side here?
Yeah.
So the definition between S and B, so this could be a small business person. They could own, a restaurant, dry cleaning service and all that. And this is the backbone of the world here, the small business guy. But they're also the tax slave. So to move over here, when I was talking to my rich dad, this is in 74, he says the definition of a B is you have to have 5, and this is not only his definition, it's IRS's definition. A B has 500 employees or more. So he says, your goal then, if you're going to become an entrepreneur, this is in 74, the question is, how do you get 500 employees? And that became kind of my goal as a young man, just getting out of the Marine Corps. And then, but the real thing was, he started teaching me to be an investor here. Now, this doesn't stand for investor, it stands for insider. The trouble with out here, and this thing with here, who stole my pension and all that stuff, is these people here buy from Wall Street. They buy stocks, bonds, mutual funds, ETFs, and all that stuff. I don't touch those things. I am an entrepreneur. I do not trust stocks. I don't trust, something you may have heard me say, I've heard it said over the years, it's why CNBC doesn't invite me on anymore. He says, I do not trust anything that can be printed. Anything that can be printed, I don't trust, and that includes the US dollar. So CNBC stopped inviting me on because I invest in oil wells. I invest into oil, but I don't invest in oil stocks, even though I was hired by Standard Oil back in 1969. I don't like stocks. I don't like bonds. I don't like mutual funds. I don't like ETFs. I own cattle. So I own Wagyu cattle. And the reason for that is, again, it's cash flow, but it's really semen flow. Because every time a Wagyu bull breeds, I get a percentage of the calf. The I, again, is insider, not investor. So the reason I invest in real estate is because I'm an insider on every deal. Today, playing Monopoly, I own hotels, and I also own 12,000 rental units. But I don't own an REIT, Real Estate Investment Trust. Mm-hmm. So the education and mindset is completely different. And because of that, a person in the B quadrant pays 20% in taxes. And the reason the B's pay less is because that's this book here. This is my CPA's, my accountant's books, Tax-Free Wealth. If you're going to make it to the B side, you must understand taxation. So that's why part of our series is this is my real tax accountant. And most people aren't going to do this because they're not interested. They just rather pay the tax or avoid taxes. I think some of the biggest criminals are when I walk into a store that says, if you pay cash, we'll give you a discount. They're not declaring their taxes. I don't recommend that. You cannot pay taxes legally. So that's this book here, Tax-Free Wealth by Tom Wheelwright. It's part of the Rich Dad series. And the people who pay the least taxes are over here, 0%. So the difference between the B and the I is the education. So when I got out of the Marine Corps in 74, the first thing my rich dad said to me is, you have to learn how to sell. And I said, okay, because entrepreneurs sell. It's number one skill. And you have to understand tax, and you have to understand debt. Because what happened in 71, as some of you know, Nixon took the dollar off the gold standard, and the US dollar became debt. So that's why you look behind me, that hot air balloon there, our whole economy is floating on debt. And they're trying to, right now, I think it's now $31.4 trillion in debt. And every time they raise interest rates, if they raise it, let's say interest rates are 5% and it's 31 trillion, that's 1.5 trillion in taxes you got to pay.
And a couple questions about that, Robert, about the B and the I. So the B, as you said, it was first, the goal was like to get 500 employees. I think today's, with technology, to your point, technology changes things, so maybe we can leverage things a little bit better. But I think what you're saying is the B has assets. The business has assets that produce wealth, so they have a brand, they have a product, or some sort of intellectual property that would then be considered an asset that could create wealth without the person having to work or trade their time. Would that be a fair comparison for the B, for the business?
Yeah, it's a little bit more sophisticated than that, but I would say that's true.
Okay.
But it's more than that. This is the BI triangle. This is book number 3. This was Rich Dad's Guide to Investing. And so I have a product. L stands for legal. It's got to be patented. When you watch Shark Tank, they'll ask the person, is your product patented?
Yep.
You've got to have it legally tied up or it's not an asset. S stands for system. So in my company, Rich Dad, we only have 12 employees. So how do I qualify as 500? That's the question. So if I have 12 employees here in Phoenix, how do I have over 500 employees? Any idea?
Well, you have systems that leverage the work of 500 people?
No. I plug it into, I'm number one in book sales throughout the world. Mm-hmm. So I have thousands and thousands and thousands of booksellers working for me.
Oh, yeah.
Plus my cash flow gains. So I developed a product that would plug into, who's calling me this time? But I developed a product that would plug into a system.
Yeah.
That's the book.
Right, that's the leverage.
And what the C stands for here is communications. And I'm known as a best-selling author. I'll never win a Pulitzer Prize. I'm not a best writing author. So I said I flunked out of high school because I can't read and write.
I want to go back just to the cash flow quadrant for a question. So what about the importance of having both the B and the I together? So Warren Buffett is an investor, but he still has a company called Berkshire Hathaway, right?
Right.
You're an investor, but you also have a business. So the importance of
Right.
still having the B and the I. So you're creating wealth and then you're multiplying the wealth. You have to use those two together.
Well, that's a fabulous question. What I'm saying is it's an education process. The education to be a B is different than education to be an I. It's the same as the education to become a medical doctor or an accountant or attorney is different. Mm-hmm. And that's why when you say to a child or what school you go to makes a big difference is what do you come out as? So if I went to law school, I'd come out a lawyer. So I went to flight school, I came out as a pilot. And so that's my long way of answering the question. Each one requires different education. And the number one education here is, again, the BI triangle. Right here is military school, mission, team, leadership. So when I went to the academy in New York, Merchant Marine Academy, the first word we're taught is mission. What's your mission? Then immediately we're taught to be part of a team, and immediately we're taught to lead. So when I was 18 years old, 1965, I go to school in New York. It's a lot of pomp and circumstance, people are marching around the academy in their white uniforms and all this. And then my uncle and aunt took me to the academy to drop me off there. They said, "Oh, you're so lucky." And as soon as they drove off the road, they start screaming at us, putting us into sections. They put one of us in charge, and the first word we learn is mission. So as a U.S. Marine, I know my mission. And so what drives me, and each and every one of you has a mission. And if you can find your personal mission in life that drives your business, then that's a spiritual power.
Yeah.
And a lot of times entrepreneurs lack the spiritual power because they're going after the money. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense, you guys here?
One more question I'd like to ask, and then if any of you guys have any questions, we can ask them. But Robert, I know you are super bullish on creativity, the creativity and what entrepreneurs can do with the creativity and how entrepreneurs can change the world. Kind of speak into that and this infinite possibilities of creativity if we have open minds, education, and entrepreneurship.
Well, that's a great question, because this year is why A students work with C students. Is if you come to my office in Phoenix or in Scottsdale, Arizona, there's a bust of Einstein. And Einstein says imagination is more important than knowledge. And when I meet attorneys and accountants and all this, I think the reason I got sued by my attorneys is because most of them are A students. And they get really pissed off that a cartoon like me makes so much more money than they do. And it's because they lack imagination. Does that make sense to you? I mean, they did all the right things. They're A students, da-da-da-da-da. They went to the best schools and da-da-da-da-da. And I come jumping out. I make a fortune in real estate. This year is July of this year, I took this public. This is the richest gold mine in America. It's the Trixie mine in Utah. So I took it public. And so that was the goal of me being an entrepreneur, was to ring the bell in the New York Stock Exchange.
Yeah.
So my goals are different than an attorney. Most attorneys are never going to ring the bell on the New York Stock Exchange.
Yeah.
But as an entrepreneur on the B side, that was my goal. And I've rung the bell in Toronto and New York Stock Exchange.
Yeah, that's
so
awesome.
Our goals are different, our skill sets are different, our drives are different, and why we do it are different. So every time I run into A students, they sue me.
Yeah, that's my biggest gripe with school and college is it takes the creativity out of you. It makes you really good at memorizing things and reciting things, and you think you're really smart, but you're just reciting and memorizing things. And creativity is what you need to be able to solve problems, and solving problems is how we make money.
And if I could say something else, the reason I work with Mark is he's in the world of YouTube, financial YouTube. He's one of the smartest guys out there. But where I kick his butt is I'm a real estate guy and I don't pay taxes.
Yep.
So that's why he still lives in the People's Republic of California, which I would never live there because I don't want to pay taxes.
But I'm nipping at your heels, Robert. I'm nipping at your heels.
I don't know. I just, Marx said a progressive income tax is essential for communism.
Yeah.
That was Marx. So I just refuse to pay taxes. I'm $1 billion in debt. And the more debt I have, the less tax I pay. And that goes back to 1913 when the Federal Reserve Bank was created. The Federal Reserve Bank was created in 1913, and so was the 16th Amendment. The IRS was created.
Yeah.
And so that when I studied this book here, the Communist Manifesto, which I had to read in 1965 at the Academy, is that what Marx said, so progressive and oppressive income tax is essential for communism.
Yeah. To echo a point that you're saying, Robert, I believe before Wheelwright, you had another book, was it Sharon Lecter or something? It was Tax Loopholes of the Rich or something like that. And I read that book. And as I read, all these different tax loopholes that the rich use, businesses, et cetera, and I put all these sticky notes in the book and I made all these notes and I was like, oh my gosh, this is so amazing. It changed my life. And I took that book and I took it to my CPA. And I said, hey, CPA, look at this book. I made all these notes, read this book. And he looked at it and he chucked it over his shoulder. He's like, nah, none of that works. That was his viewpoint of it.
Well, there's a reason for that too, is that Sharon was a 401k person. So to make debt and taxes work is you have to have debt. Mm-hmm. And, as you know, banks love to lend money on real estate. So she had no real estate.
Yeah.
So it couldn't work. Yeah. And the 13th, the Federal Reserve Bank was created, I think, 1913.
Yep.
So as long as you know history, you have a chance of, you have a better chance. It also drove me to be on the B and the I side because I don't want to pay a lot of taxes. So it drove me to get the skills to be on the B and the I side, which is, again, this is the BI triangle here. And I had to do it with a good team. I had to be a good leader, mission driven. And you run into a lot of criminals out there, as you know. So it's a tough game you guys are in.
Yeah.
Robert,
I think
I'll give you the biggest compliment I can give you is studying with Mark Moss is one of the smartest things you can do. It's one of the things I constantly do is I'm always either teaching or I'm learning. I'm on YouTube 24/7 almost. I listen to guys I don't like and I listen to guys I like.
Yeah.
And I'll say this much, every time I listen to Mark Moss, he knows his stuff. The trouble is he doesn't know taxes. That's why he lives in California.
I'm learning, Robert. I'm learning. I'm learning.
Well, I give him a lot of shit because he's a surfer.
Yeah. And
he says, well, I had to move near the ocean. I said, you could have moved to Florida. They don't have taxes there. Yeah. But he's good. But understand, you can be smart at one thing. Like you could be smart at product development. You could be a smart attorney. You can engineer with systems. You could be good with communication, sales, marketing. And this is an accountant cash flow here. And like I said, the first lesson I learned was mission, team, leadership was military school. So that's why when my rich dad was kind of coaching me along. He says, you got this side down, you don't have this here.
Thank you so much for taking the time out of your schedule. I'm really looking forward to hanging out with you in Vancouver this weekend. I'll be meeting you up there for the conference, so I'm excited about that. What is your view on precious metals going forward? What's your opinion on precious metals? You're pretty vocal about it, but if you want to go ahead and say what that is. That question's from Martin.
Let me tell you a quick story here. This here is a pre-64 quarter. The reason 64 is a year, that was the year that President Johnson took the silver out of our coins. So Johnson gets on the air, 64, I was 17 years old. I'm looking at this damn coin, dimes, quarters, and half dollars. And I said, they're copper. And what the SOB did was he started taking the silver out of our coins. So the other day, so this is a 64, I was at Safeway, and I'm kind of the salad bar guru there. So all these women are, they're working, they're serving me salads and all this. I'm ordering some coleslaw and all this. And so these women are saying, what should I invest in?
Yeah.
What should I invest in? And they know something's wrong. They can see the economy is coming in for a hard landing. And I just happen to have this quarter. It came from my friend Dana. Sam was from Austin, Texas. He sent me the pre-64 coin. So I hold it out. And I said, this is your best investment. It's a long way of answering a question. So I said, if you give me $3, I'll give you this quarter. Now they stopped serving me coleslaw. What the hell are you talking about? I said, I'll sell you this for $3. And what transformation is, it's not education, it's transformation. Their brains are going left, right, left, right. Why would I pay you $3 for 25 cents? And they're just scrambled. And I said, because this is real, this is fake.
Yeah.
This is real, this is fake. So I cut it down to $2. And their brains are scrambling. They're going, why would I give you $2 for a quarter? I said, because this is real and this is fake.
Yep.
Do you know what I mean? And the problem is today, what was happening in our schools is we're teaching kids to work for fake money. Go to school, get a job, work hard, save money, get out of debt, and invest for the long term in a 401k.
I want to add just to that, just to what he was saying. In 1964, with that quarter would buy you a gallon of gas. Today, that quarter is still worth about a gallon of gas.
Yeah, Mark's exactly correct. The real price of this quarter is this here, $5. So this is a 25 cent, but it's real silver. So it's $5 in this. So these women serving me my coleslaw, they're going, their brains are still fried. Every time I walk in there, they look at me kind of suspiciously. I said, have you guys bought your quarter yet? No. They want the cash. Go to school, work hard, save money, get out of debt, and invest for the long term in a well-diversified portfolio, stocks, bonds, mutual funds, and ETFs. I call that brainwashing. That's why we're the rebels of education. It's time we fight back.
Yeah. Well,
And I'm very sincere, Mark. I commend your group for giving their time to be in your class. It's the most valuable use of your time. Even if Mark is full of shit, he pays taxes.
All right. All right. The audience is just saying they just want to commend you for doing what you've done for so long and taking the fight to them and pushing for education. And so everybody here is super thankful for the work that you've done over your career. It's helped shape me. It's helped me go pass it on. And taking that fight to the education system, the financial system, you've done amazing work. So they all want to say thank you for that.
And as Einstein said, imagination is more important than knowledge.
Yeah, perfect.
So that's why you're entrepreneurs.
Perfect way to end it, Robert. Man, I just really appreciate you, all the education you've given to me and coming and speaking to the group. And thank you for that. And like I said, I look forward to hanging out with you this weekend.
Yeah, don't work for this crap.